Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special Philos'o'clock with EcceFatum and TriciaxPain. Today we're going to be talking about animal ethics. Welcome, both lovely guests.
Hello.
Yo. Tricia, welcome. And also Loki, welcome. We have two guests, but we're mainly going to be working from the series of questions that EcceFatum got for us here. There are 12 of them, and I might as well just share them with chat so people can jump in and know what we're working with here. You started us with, how do we separate between animal and human? Is there a key difference between them? How did you arrive at this question?
This question is a couple of thousand years old. I think it was Aristotle or the Western canon first separating between animals and humans, and he called humans the rational animal. So for him, what separated animals to humans was just our ability to rationalize things. I think there's more differences that are worth pointing out, but it's a good distinction, although I don't think we should necessarily think of animals as not being rational. I've seen plenty of rational decisions by animals, whether or not to wait or try to steal the food right now when it comes to our dog, because if you're waiting, you're better off getting away with the action. So there's rational behavior in animals as well.
Like Loki staring at his bowl, hoping for the food bowl to be filled.
Yeah, I'm thinking about kind of defining the terms here. What does it mean to be rational? I can break it down by the word. Ration as in like portions of things or portions of one's mind and one's interests. Every creature that exists, every animal, has a priority system basically of what it wants in order from what it wants the most to what it dislikes the most. And it's going to navigate through its environment in a fairly predictable way based on those priorities. And this applies to cats, dogs, humans, every animal creature. You can notice certain things that it will gravitate toward and certain things that it will avoid. And sometimes a situation is complicated where it has multiple things that they want and they have to choose, or it has multiple things that they want to avoid and it has to pick the lesser of two evils. So you can assess basically how many factors and how many priorities a given animal has, but there's no super clear dividing line between where humanity ends and then the rest of, quote, animals begin, because we have direct overlap with a lot of these exact same systems as the animals because we are also animals. So it's an interesting concept that we grow up, like I definitely felt this way, that humans were superior to other kinds of animals and we were the stewards of the planet. And we were different and they're not quite on our level, so they don't quite get the same treatment as us. We can kind of do whatever. Ideally, in a good way, we're ruling the planet, but we've definitely been given a lot of propaganda that says humans are a different kind of creature.
Yeah, a lot of the human first propaganda comes from the Christian religion. It's in other religion it's treated differently, although the sentiment for the most part on a global scale is we care more about humans than we do about animals, and that's because they're not only but specifically a lot better at verbalizing their needs and thoughts and wants, which are animals, not saying they're incapable of it, but not as poignant as humans are.
Is it funny that I'm the opposite, and that's why I've always resonated more with animals, because I feel like I can understand their needs and wants way more than humans?
I think most animal species are less likely to practice verbal deception as us. I feel like the language factor is one of the most distinct for humans, but then even among certain other animals, we've identified that dolphins have communication, like they have words between each other. Certain ravens have a lot of different language type expression they can have. In terms of like writing books and building cities, obviously humans have a huge leg up on that front. But understanding the different kinds of hyper intelligent things that other animals do is a practice that I feel like wasn't really taught to kids growing up. Like, I always thought about cows and pigs and stuff as stupid. I thought of cats as stupid as well, because I grew up with dogs and we had a border collie, which is like the number one smartest dog. So I had that as my reference point. And cats don't obey you compared to a border collie. Border collie, I could teach a dog a trick in one day and he's like learning super fast. So to me, that resonated with the kind of intelligence that I wanted to see. Whereas cats, they do have expressions for love, and they will kind of, you can steer them basically by understanding their priority system, but they don't have the same mental framework for the social hierarchy that humans and dogs do, of dominant roles socially and then submissive roles socially, and kind of learning where they fall in the family order. Cats basically, they consider themselves to be the ruler of their domain, and the human makes sure that they're safe and makes sure that they're fed, and if the human doesn't give them enough food, they're sure to alert them with meows. And their meows are like specially designed to hit our nurturing instinct, which makes us feel like there's a little baby that needs help and needs care. Like, the baby whine for food is very similar to the cat whine for food. So they basically developed an intelligent solution for getting a very powerful species on the planet to serve them.
That's how we know they're aliens. They're very smart.
We serve them food, we serve them protection, and a lot of things. And it's really interesting that elements that you wouldn't consider to be like book smart are definitely very clever innovations of an animal species. EcceFatum, you have a Dalmatian, correct?
Yes.
No,
Nice.
that's awesome.
And those are relatively sharp dogs, I think.
I would say so.
Yeah. Have you had mostly dogs in your life?
I grew up with cats, and then I met my wife, and she had a dog, so I became a dog owner by default.
Nice.
Do you mind if I ask if your dog is a rescue or not?
It's not.
Okay, I always wondered if, because Dalmatians are very rare. Like, I never see Dalmatians, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, they're a tricky breed to take care of their needs. They need a lot of exercise, and they're very, like, you need to have them around you all the time. They're not good at staying by themselves, so they're not a breed that a lot of people can take care of properly. So that's why I don't think they're not as common anymore.
Unless you have 101 of them, then they can be friends.
Exactly. And we didn't get a rescue because my wife is very particular about wanting a dog that basically didn't come with a lot of unknown prior issues, where you're sure it grew up nicely.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the tabula rasa, where you want an impressionable kind of peaceful unit that hasn't experienced any major trauma. I've met some dogs that have been through like physically dangerous environments, and it's very different the way that they behave compared to an animal that's had a peaceful experience around humans. If you have an animal like Loki's very blessed and lucky in that he's never been traumatized by humans in a sense that long-term affected him. So when humans walk up to him, he's like, hey, what's up? Like, he doesn't care. But this dog that I saw, as soon as you walk in the room, it like cowers on the ground like you're about to strike it or something. And it's like, what? I have no quarrel with you, dog. Like,
Alexa, stop timer.
Like, what's wrong? And that's because the dog had been around people who were not good to it. So it makes sense for them to have a fear-based reaction as a response to that. And that does make them much harder to work with. Like, it's a high anxiety animal. It needs to go to the restroom at weird times. It's like super scared of everything. Like, that's more of a recovery process rather than like having an animal that you can lead and that can work for you. A lot of these really smart dogs, like the way that they can navigate the home, like they do what you tell them. If it's a well-adjusted, well-behaved, disciplined dog and they understand and respect you, like that's an asset to the tribe in a sense, versus sometimes you're sheltering an animal that needs support and you need to invest in that animal to just give it the good rest of its life. But yeah, I respect the idea of having an animal that hasn't had any experience yet, and you get to shape that entirely as a animal parent, basically.
I wish I could help all the animals that are traumatized to get them more socialized so they can get homes and the shelters and stuff, because that's the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they don't end up getting homes.
Yeah. We don't really have the breakdown of like what is our long-term plan as a species for how we're going to treat animals and what are we working on. There isn't really a unified discussion on that front, I feel like, and it's not really part of our education to think about from the first principles. How do you treat cats and dogs and things like that? But to keep us somewhat focused, I think we should probably try to.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to put the food in, or take the food out for you.
Oh, thank you.
I would argue that other than number go up, we don't have any long-term plan for anything as a species.
Number go up. Valid. We should grow, we should expand. We should do so in an upright manner if we can. Lord Callion, thank you for the 39 months. Chat, welcome to a animal ethics discussion. Chat saying dogs only bark to humans, cats only meow to humans. Dogs are a group animal and see you as the leader of the pack, providing the hunt/food. Cats are solitary, and indeed, they see the area as their territory. Yes.
I feel like cats see you as another cat. If you're lucky, they're just kind of like whatever.
I think of it like
Quite vicious with other cats, so I'd hope a cat wouldn't see me as another cat.
Yeah, they would go at you in certain ways for sure. Expand, consume, absorb. Question 2. What's the difference between human and animal consciousness? My immediate knee-jerk question is depends on the animal. Which animal were you talking about? Because they're all different kinds of consciousness. Consciousnesses? What is the plural of that?
Conchai?
Conchai.
I don't know.
But that, yeah, you could say there's a unique one for every animal species and then for every individual animal because there's variance within a species for how their brains work. You've got some more aggressive wolves. You've got some more skittish wolves, for example. You can also plot the distance between our human consciousness and the animal consciousness that you're talking about. So we're going to have a very different consciousness than a fish, but a relatively more similar one with a gorilla, just based on our evolutionary heritage.
I think the most common question in philosophy is, what does it feel like to be a bat?
Well, bats
not
are.
Sure why they took a bat specifically, but it's interesting because it has senses different to ours. So there's a difference in how they perceive the world from a sensory point of view.
True, yeah, echolocation being a main difference from we are very vision reliant, and they're going to be navigating in extremely dark environments, so they use sound to move, and they fly as well, so a very different experience being a bat to being a human. Imagine that for a little bit, chat. Sorry, go ahead, Trisha.
Bats' faces are so cute.
They are very cute.
They're so cute.
It's interesting that they are depicted as a scary animal, but when you like hold one in your hand and you like look at its face, it's a little like squirrel that flies, basically.
Oh.
So, yeah, bats are very different. Imagine you are a flying creature that's kind of fuzzy, and you yell really loudly at the walls to find your way around.
Sound like an X-Men.
Hey, hey, hey! Animals that are kind of stand out for me in terms of consciousness. Octopus is one that's being studied more. They're kind of famous for being the most intelligent invertebrate, so animal without a spine. Of any animal that doesn't have a spine, this would include like slugs and even bugs and stuff like that. The octopus is a standout. They will have decorations for their home. They'll have like the trophies and the shells and sparkly things of different stuff that they've found or different stuff that they've killed to kind of show off. They're super, super smart. They can squish through really interesting areas. Like they're a very navigable animal because they don't have a spine. So they can get into really tight places without too much issue. A really cool animal, the octopus. I've actually, not to upset you, Tricia, but
Oh, no, I know we talked about it.
I have eaten octopus before. And it was kind of part of my macho cred, I feel like, is a motivator for me eating weird stuff. That's one thing where if someone says, ooh, gross to something, it's kind of macho to be like, well, then I'm going to do it, sort of a deal. It tastes basically the same as squid, but squid are less intelligent. And that kind of points me to one of the assessments that I've made in valuing creatures based on how we perceive their intelligence. So valuing an octopus more than a squid because the octopus is smarter. That's something that I feel like is kind of just built into how we perceive the world. We value things that we see similarity in, and we
That's what I
value
was just
stats.
gonna say. The conversation that you guys are having right now is like, it's very in my head. I'm like, who cares who's smart or not? Let's not fucking eat them and fuck with them.
Yeah.
That's why I
My
look
view
at
is
it.
not to eat them because they're chewy.
They're
That
chewy.
makes sense.
They're very rubbery. A lot of people just don't like the texture of that kind of thingy. But yeah, all kinds of different animal consciousness. Another one that was a eye opener for me was cows. Cow consciousness is a lot more complex than I thought it was. I thought they were just like out in the fields, like doo-doo-doo, like not a single thought in their head, because that's kind of the joke, is being dumb like a cow. But cows have a best friend. I didn't know that until pretty recently. So they'll have one other cow that they vibe with the most, and they'll just do normal cow stuff like eat grass next to each other. They just like each other's presence, and that's really cute. And that's a similarity with humans, is humans can oftentimes have a best friend or people they enjoy vibing and hanging out with.
They also have the monarch, and remember all the stuff that they were telling us about
Matriarch,
that?
yeah.
Matriarch, not monarch. And then how the one who passed away recently at the Gentle Barn, like anointed or like appointed the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really cute. But that was the one cow who like would tell them all to get up and then tell them all to go to bed and like give them all like, you know, kind of be the mama of all of them. It was really cute.
Yeah, it's kind of like a headmistress at school almost, where they're a senior one who knows how things should be done and they make sure people do things correctly. In certain other social structures, like lions, are really interesting in that the lion who gets to be with the pride is the dude lion who can fight off every other dude lion at the time. And that's a very difficult title to hold, where you have people who are going at you to kill your ass on a regular basis. So for you to have control of the group, you need to be consistently taking these kind of fights where people are trying to go at your title so they can take your pride. Like, that's a very specific and interesting environment that's got to give them a different kind of consciousness. You can think about the perspective of the aspiring lion who wants to be the leader of the pack, and he has to think about an opportunity and how to get enough food for himself so he's strong enough to challenge the main dude. Like, there's stuff that's going through these animals' minds as they're navigating these situations, and they do have these priority systems, but we don't usually think about the different assessments that an animal intelligent is making in its environment. We think about how lions don't have music, lions don't build cities, like they don't do a lot of stuff that we can do, but the stuff that we can do is based on building off the knowledge of thousands of years of human progress. That's
But
the key
also-
edge.
But also like our need for like, I feel like, I don't know, we have different need for, I feel like we'd be pretty happy living a life of an animal, chilling and, you know, chilling and just, you know, living off the land and whatever the fuck. But we have a lot of like goals to do all this other crazy shit. So it'd be really cool to see if randomly animals want to build a city out of nowhere. But it's like, what would their reason for doing that be? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, realistically, are like, what's their reason for doing it? If they're maybe build houses, little huts.
Yeah, that's a question that I would have for both animals and robots if we can communicate with
Yeah.
them, which is, what do you want? What
Yeah.
what would you like more of on this planet?
I mean, cats already fucking figured it out. They're like, we don't have to work to build houses. We could just fucking be cute and get inside of them and get fed. So
Cats do have a direct survival benefit to humans, though, in pest control and disease control. Cats will eat a lot of stuff that could disease transmission and kill humans. So for people to have cats on the property is a net plus for us as well. So that's a symbiotic relationship, which is really cool. And then cats and humans also, and like dogs and humans, they have an emotional support feedback loop where by snuggling, by hanging out, by playing together, by having positive interactions, you morally boost the other, even though you're not the same species. So like oxytocin is one of the main neurotransmitters that is released whenever you experience affection and physical touch and care. Like whenever you're rubbing behind a dog's ear or whatever, and you can tell that that feels good for them because that massages out some of their like tension and stuff there. There's a feedback between both of them. So this is an animal relationship that doesn't have words where we can't exactly hold a conversation with the animal, but we can share positive experiences that benefit both. But we're kind of with a set of very specific animals that are our buddies in that sense. Domesticated cats and domesticated dogs are specifically different because we've selected certain ones for thousands of years. A lot of other animals we have not done so. So it's an interesting question of which animals should be pets.
Yeah, I think we'll get to that question or why we differentiate on a later one. I wanted to say first on the topic of how are we feeling or how the goals of animals. One of my favorite saying is as happy as a protozoa can be. Like a single third organism, we don't think it can have happiness, but we can never tell. And would be to kind of come back to the question of consciousness. It's my professional philosophical opinion that we know fuck all about human consciousness, and we know even less than nothing about animal consciousness. We don't know where it comes from, what function it's supposed to serve, why we have it, and if it's a good or a bad thing. And to the question of what does it feel like to be a bat, we can, even if we could jump into a bat consciousness for a couple of minutes, we could only see it as a contrast to ourselves. We could be in there and be ourselves experiencing a bat experience, but that's not what the bat is experiencing. It's a bat. It's different from us. It's not thinking about the world in the same terms we do. So we could only ever get a bat experiences the world in this regard, contrasting to how we are, but we would never see what it's like to be a bat. And this goes for all the animals. It goes for other humans too. We never know what it is like, what it feels like to be someone different.
Well, from the neuroscience that I've learned, I would agree with the sentiment that we know fuck all about consciousness for humans. We don't have a theory of consciousness right now. We cannot plot a person's consciousness in their brain. Like technically, you could think about an algorithm that describes all of a person's neurons and the potential for how they might change in the next patch for the next day. But that's a very, very complex assessment that we're very, very far from making, just because of how often our brains are changing their connections and how hard it is to study all of those things firing at once. Like you're talking about millions and billions of pieces all interacting with each other in real time and trying to figure out how that simulates identity and how it simulates a person and their social group and all this kind of stuff. There's a ton of stuff going on, and we're just kind of like stepping on the moon for the first time in that sense. We're not even there yet, I would say, for consciousness. The moon is relatively more accessible in the sense that you can step on the moon and it won't die or change itself. With the brain, if you crack it open, it will often die. So it's very delicate for us to be able to study consciousness on a direct level.
I like Sun Tzulander's take on this about how the other species might be more intelligent. They might not be able to build things and have tools, but they might have more emotional consciousness or intelligence.
Yeah, well,
We don't know.
a lot of animals have types of intelligence that we don't, like the bat,
Yeah.
as an example. Like, they are infinitely smarter than us when it comes to echolocation because we're not equipped for that. So we definitely think very highly of ourselves, that our type of intelligence is the best type of intelligence.
Yeah.
But just as animals haven't built great cities as us, they also haven't committed great atrocities like us. So it's a double edge of having the kinds of advantages that we do.
Yeah. And kind of to bring this back to the ethics part, and this is one of the rare occasions I refer in a good sense to Kantian ethics. We need to treat other people in a sense that we can assume that they are similar enough to us, that they have goals, they have feelings, they have wants and needs, so we should treat them accordingly. And this would also extend to animals, where we can assume that they have wants and needs, they have feelings, they are similar to our consciousness in enough degrees that they should be fully considered on an ethical spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we never know what their consciousness might look or feel like.
Yeah, we can make enough inferences. I think just using the pain response as a basic, like super basic guidepost of we would choose not to inflict pain in other humans because that's mean. So similarly, we would try to minimize the pain that we project onto the animal kingdom as well, just if you're trying to live a peaceful life. Obviously, there's the assessment of like protecting oneself and that kind of thing. Tricia and I were actually talking about that, about how you can exercise a few extra steps and save a pest or a bug or an animal that's like inside your home for some reason or on your property, or you can just kill it, and how there's simplicity and safety sometimes in using violence. But with the amount of power that we have over the planet right now, we do have the capacity for great good and great loving kindness toward other things. So the question is, how do we want to invest in that energy for ourselves and also for our society?
I saved a damn mosquito yesterday.
That's like one of the most hated of all the creatures.
I know. I was getting so annoyed at it too. I was like, get in the fucking cup.
Yep. I remember in church they used to say, and God made all the plants and animals, and the devil made mosquitoes.
What is EcceFatum's eating habits, if he doesn't mind saying if he's vegan or vegetarian or where he stands on that? Someone's asking in my chat. I do not know the answer to that.
We'll get to that a bit later
Okay,
on, but
perfect.
I can tell you now, I eat all the things I like.
Okay.
And I'm not a good person to ask about dietary advice.
We have an extremely balanced set of guests here today. I am the recent vegan, Tricia is the long-term vegan, and EcceFatum is the non-vegan. So it's perfectly balanced. That's how you know this is a fair segment. So you're all represented here today.
This brings me to a completely off-topic question. In terms of how the English language refers to dietary restrictions, you have the carnivores and the different types. So our kid used to only live off of milk for the first couple of months. Would that be a lactovore?
I'm not sure. I feel like if you're having milk and other things, it'd be vegetarian, right? Vegetarian can have cheese and milk and stuff.
I would
Don't have
actually,
meat.
I would go with the label mammal, because every mammal shares that. So it's not really a preference or a choice. It's just the equipment that you're dealt. Like, that's the only kind of energy that you can get in the start because of how sensitive your system is and how undeveloped even other animals are. Like, cats drink milk, dogs drink milk, horses drink milk. Like, they all do, because that's the way that a like less than completely developed baby can get some calories in a way that doesn't require work and chewing and breaking things down that are dense, like adults have to. And
You're
even
talking about
kids.
baby. You're not talking. Wait, you said for the first months? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, then that makes sense. I thought you said first years. I was like, okay, you had a lot of milk. I was like, okay, vegetarian, but you meant as a baby.
Yeah.
As a yes. As a what's the
Infant.
infant? That's the word I'm looking
There we
for.
go. I don't know things about baby stuff.
Apparently, the internet doesn't bring anything up for lactivore, so I thought this could be a nice thing to kind of push as a meme in terms of we should be really, really manly and good mammals in order to do that. Just drink milk, only milk. But then I thought of the ethical implications of people actually thinking this is real and then dying off of that diet because it's just stupid. So I decided against it.
Yeah, that's the danger. As if you're trying to make a meme about a meal plan and someone follows it religiously, that could get you in trouble.
No.
And to get us back on our series of questions, we have, which animals do we treat differently to others and why? Pets, for example. Cats, dogs, horses, cows, pigs. I'm thinking of like the animal husbandry ones that we've picked. We definitely treat cats and dogs separate from pretty much everything else. And then
I would treat everything equal.
I think there's 4 interesting distinctions to make. One is animals we love, being pets, animals that are useful to us, animals we don't give a shit about, and animals that are dangerous to us.
Okay. That's pretty simple. I like that. So animals we love, that's like the cats and dogs. If you have a rabbit, that would kind of be in that section where it's a companion animal that you don't like put to work. And then you have working animals. Like this would include also stuff that is killed for meat, I would say. Also like horses carrying people around, pulling stuff, like oxen even, if you're using ox to pull a cart or something in the Himalayas. Cats also, in a working sense, they're pest control for yourself. Dogs are also base defense. They have better sense of smell and hearing than us, so they can watch out for stuff and bark at people. Oh, chickens mentioned in the chat. True. Goats, sheep for the wool.
There's other animals too, like lab rats, lab monkeys.
Oh yeah.
That are useful to us.
Yeah, because they're so genetically similar. So they tend to respond to different products in a similar way that we would.
There's also breeders that use animals to make more animals.
Yeah, so useful to us, mostly referring to being used by us.
Yes. And that's one of the things where we're giving the animal a trade that they can't really say yes or no to because they don't speak language in the ways that we do. So they can't grant us consent. But you can give animals a variety of trades, from the sweetest, bestest pet life that you could imagine, where they get everything they want, they have a lot of space to move around, they get plenty of attention and stimulation, and they're happy and well-fed and safe, like ideal kind of trade, into something that's kind of like maybe a medium trade where you can't really tell if it's a good or bad relationship. There's a horse maybe that gets to run around a little bit, so it does have some fresh air, but it doesn't have as much land as the horse would really want. You've got those kind of things middle of the road, and then you've got the stuff that's just straight up scary, which is like the industrial animal farming stuff where people are packed into metal compartments, or the animals are packed into metal compartments and shoved down narrow passageways and then killed. Like, that's the extreme end of it, where obviously this is not a good trade for the animal. This is purely for us, and there isn't really much ethical consideration here. So there's the full range of our treatment to animals, and every person has their own responsibility for how do you want to navigate with your interaction with the animal kingdom. And a lot of that comes down to the environment that we're raised in, like how your family and friends and stuff have treated animals. That's your starting impression that you have to work with.
Yeah.
There's definitely the why we treat animals different. The cuteness factor is a big one. We have nurturing instincts that make us want to care for things, and fuzzy things and things with big eyes and adorable faces, they tend to motivate us to take care of them. We want to take care of a cat or a dog because they're cute. Same thing with rabbits. Whereas when you see a scorpion, you don't really feel like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Like, you don't have that same response to a scorpion.
People also are, like I said earlier, aren't exposed to cows, aren't exposed to pigs very much. They just get this idea of, something too. But they do put images of cows and pigs still cute, but people still want to eat them. So, I don't know. That one's a mixed one.
Also, baby snakes are kind of cute.
Mm-hmm. Lizards are cute.
They also have the big eyes going.
Yeah, geckos.
Lizards are so cute. Baby dinosaurs.
Back when we used to play Cards Against Humanity, and the game kind of relies on what sense of humor you have. For us, the eugenics card was kind of a joker because it's such an abhorrent idea to do eugenics on a human scale that you could basically pull it everywhere and get points. But eugenics is so common for us to do with animals, where it's not even a question whether or not selective breeding is something we should do or could be problematic in any sense, which I find questionable, to say the least.
Yeah, that's kind of connected to the next question, which is which human rights could or should be extended to animals. Saying that eugenics is bad is like kind of a human decision that we've made for ourselves, but then for us to very creatively and in a widespread capacity, like selectively breed cats and dogs and horses and cows. Like, we're breeding the fastest horses, we're breeding the cows that have the most milk, the cows that have the most meat, like all these different very specific things that are for us. Whereas if we were to do that for humans, that would be very weird and fucked up, and you would get arrested very fast and be all over the news. Like, that's kind of weird stuff. So which human rights do you think we should extend to animals? Say, for example, the right to bear firearms. Do you think bears should be allowed to bear arms?
Not arms in the sense of weapons, but they should be entitled to have their regular arms.
They should be allowed to have bears.
Yeah.
As friends.
The question Fuzzy Court posed, I think, is quite the interesting one.
Given the vast majority of animals in nature live at subsistence level and die of starvation, violence, disease, or exposure, why do we glorify or romanticize this state of nature?
That's a big question.
I think because the state of nature doesn't have a lot of the ugliness that we have imposed upon the world, but it does have its own ugliness and its own suffering that we haven't experienced. Most people who are glorifying the state of nature have not been in the state of nature. Same reason that we glorify or romanticize pirates. You haven't actually been killed and maimed and robbed by pirates before. Once you have, that's now a trauma for you and it's not fun. But before you've had that experience, you're like, hey, Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, I like pirates. It can be made to look really cool. So the state of nature is something that looks really cool in the sense that it has beauty and the animals look really cool, but it does have violence within it, and it does have just scarcity of resources. So, yeah, the reason we glorify and romanticize it is because we haven't been in it.
Pirates is a great example. Samurai culture would be another one.
Oh, yeah. I read Hagakure, and there was some stuff in it that just seemed like so random and off topic for samurai stuff, but the samurai were just people, and they wrote about the stuff that was fashionable and sexy to them at the time, which much of it was not related to swordsmanship, but it was still baked into Bushido culture. So similarly, it's kind of like what stuff has been baked into our culture that we currently romanticize but might not really be good?
There was a specific Japanese term for killing a random bypasser in order to test out a sword.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yikes.
this was such a common practice, they had to have a specific word for it.
Wow. That's, I would say, extremely unethical.
It's not the nicest thing to do. But then again, how else would you know if your sword is good? Like, that's important too.
Can't you use a dead body that's already dead? If you really had to?
Sushigiri. Thank you.
Yeah, so be wary of when stuff gets romanticized or glorified. Some human rights that I feel like should be extended to animals. I feel like giving animals space is one of the things that we're struggling with right now because we so aggressively want to expand. So giving them the rights to some territory as we grant ourselves rights to some territory, like having a basic, like you have the minimum for free range chickens or whatever, which I know is bullshit and many companies don't actually adhere to it and so on. But how much space does a horse deserve? How much space does a dog deserve? Like, that would be an interesting thing to figure out. If you have a horse or a dog with an infinite range, like how much range does it actually use to feel like it can live a proper life and that kind of thing? I don't know. But it seems like an interesting assessment to think about. We grant each other sovereignty. We grant each other property. Are there areas within nature, kind of like we have Yellowstone Park and stuff? Like the U.S. has some national forests that are protected and no one can build stuff on. I'm guessing Switzerland has places like that as well. But how much space do these animals that are on the planet deserve, and can we give them any rights on that front?
There's been quite the push, although unsuccessfully, for rights to space for horses. And my wife owns a horse, and it has a lot of space to roam in the Alps during summertime, and is confined to a area. How big would that be? Like a soccer field worth of space to roam around with other horses. And this, I think, is rather fair. They don't want to run around as much when it's all packed with snow. But one thing for certain, they are social animals. So they want to be with other horses, and having them in little boxes is most definitely not ethical.
So if she only has the one horse, but the horse hangs out with other horses, is there like a horse meetup? How does that work?
It's a stable, like half an hour away, where a bunch of different people have their horse.
Oh, cool.
And they share the space with cows and chickens. Like it's a big farm, and the horses are just part of it. I think that the space or a animal wants to have to be able to roam around is quite a bit vaster than we would like it to be in order to have them contained. But it varies very much from species to species and from individual animal to individual animal. Like it's hard to come up with a specific number for any type of animal, because some of the individuals would like to have more, others are very fine with the amount of territory they get.
Also,
and what's
go ahead.
Always true is no matter how much space you give them, the grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah, that's the same for humans too.
It's true.
Also, good, thank you for your support. Welcome, chat. We're discussing animal ethics with EcceFatum and TriciaxPain.
Certain space and stuff I understand for certain animals if it's going to be a pet and they're actually going to like survive, but I feel like the hardest thing is all the arguments over the I think they're called gestation crates and stuff for like the pigs and stuff and all that stuff, and people are arguing and how many, because right now like certain pig trucks and stuff, they have they're like pretty much slammed so far on top of each other, they're like just, it's like they have no room. And I remember, I haven't checked into it, but there was a bunch of stuff that we had tried to get them to make the gestation crates bigger for the pigs, but then also to make it so that there's less pigs on each truck, and they went to go pass the law, and then I think recently they took it away so that they can stack them up again. But yeah, that's something that it's like they just pretty much are like, well, if they're going to their death anyway, let's just make as much money off of them as possible, because that would just cost them more money to make more trips with more trucks. So they don't give a fuck, you know, they're just like, they're going to kill them anyway. So that's something that just like makes me really sad, because it's like, man, they're only alive for like 6-7 months. Can you just give them a little bit? It's just sad.
Yeah, that's kind of tied to one of the rights that's pointed out in chat here. They said that freedom from torture is the main human right that we should extend to animals, and the right to live. So we consider torture to be wrong, and most governments and even their military, it's frowned upon to torture people for information. Like we've decided waterboarding is not good. People can be trained with torture resistance anyway, to where they're not going to give you the information even if you are torturing them. So that's something that's really ugly, and we've decided not to do to other humans. So that would be another one where, can you give an animal a life that is not torturous? You gave the example of like industrial farming and how the distance between the classical farm, because this was my mindset whenever I was eating animal products and stuff, was cows live on a happy grassy farm with sunshine and clouds and a nice field where they can frolic about for several years, and then they get to be a hamburger later on. Like that was my kind of headcanon on it. And then seeing how like the big factory farming is a very different experience that's more so economized as much as possible for the profit. And they're looking for the company's profit at the end of the day after all expenses have gone through. So there isn't really a reason for them, if their primary motivation is profit, to, like you said, with the pig
property.
Yeah.
Bring number, it's property.
Yeah.
Just like I told you, when the trucks get smashed, or when there's a, like, that's why, you guys, I'm really trying to get a car, like really trying to get a car, because sometimes I see these things happen and it's like, oh, a pig truck, you know, crashed on the highway, so they're gonna, like, I think the most recent one was like a chicken truck crashed somewhere, and they pretty much just, all these animal rights activists show up and they beg them to let them go, because what they're gonna do is, because they're contaminated now, they just put a tent over the truck and then they gas it and they kill all the chickens. And it's like, well, they're property. And sometimes you can get them to give you one or something, but it's like, they really don't give a fuck. They're like, this is property. We don't care. And it's like, just give them to a sanctuary then. Like, at that point, like, what the fuck? But then they have to worry about the numbers. And then what if something happens with the chickens? It's all because of insurance and property. And no one gives a fuck about the animals there. It's just really sad. It's just, you can argue all you want when you're in front of them. They don't care.
Yeah, well, anyone who's going to be working in that kind of field, I would guess, is going to have a bunch of like what's called idea inoculation, where they basically give themselves a reason for why everything they're doing is okay, to justify it, basically.
Yeah, like the fucking truck drivers, when I would give water to the pigs before they go in the slaughterhouse. I used to work with an animal rights group that we would stand outside at Farmer John's slaughterhouse in downtown LA, and the trucks would go by, and that, like, you'd see the pigs right as they were going to the slaughterhouse, and you'd pretty much have like a spray bottle thing, and you try to give them some water. Most of the time they've been on trucks for fucking sometimes days, in the heat or in the cold, depending on where they're coming from different states and stuff, and they are bloody sometimes they're sick, sometimes they're dead, sometimes they have gross stuff growing out of them and shit, and a lot of times their mouths are just like shut from being dehydrated. So we try to give them a little bit of water. And you have no idea how many times these truck drivers would try to run us over. And even in Canada, a woman got run over, and it's a big thing that that they made it so that we're not allowed to give water to the pigs anymore, because this woman got run over, and somehow the fucking people got away with the fact that they pretty much said it was her fault for being there. And it's like, yeah, no, it was like a whole thing. So I don't want to get into that because that'll get me very emotional, but yeah, it's just sad, because we just want to be there to try to help the animals a little bit. And I get it, the truck drivers are just doing their job, and I understand, but it's just sad when you're just like, okay, like we're just trying to give them a little bit of love before they go in and die, but all right. Yeah.
Yeah, the accountability there for how we're treating animals, it's not in front of people most of the time. Like the average person isn't really thinking about the day-to-day of what's going on behind where their food is coming from. They're just enjoying the end product of the food item. So all those assessments and things, they kind of keep it out of sight, out of mind. I definitely did for most of my life. So that assessment and kind of having your own mental picture of what farming is like when really, what's the ratio of factory farming versus like small local farming? I think it's like 91% factory farming now. So it's a pretty big industry. And that means that as the animal industry grows and grows, our ethical footprint on the animal kingdom is changing as well. So for us to assess how are we going to conduct ourselves is a pretty major step for us as a species. EcceFatum and I have talked about the philosophical concept of the expanding sphere of moral concern and how you tend to start from the smallest of you morally concern yourself with yourself just so you can survive, and then you expand that to your family and your immediate group, and then you expand that to your kind of extended family and your tribe, and then you expand that to other tribes, and then maybe the whole planet for humans, and then to animals and our environment as well. So we're expanding beyond where we used to concern ourselves because we have the luxury of doing so. One of the main innovations of humans was agriculture. Our ability to cultivate crops on the land and to create a lot more food than we could physically pick that was just like randomly growing in these environments. Like we're digging and we're planting stuff in the ground systematically, and then we're irrigating on top of that. This is a key innovation that other animals have not achieved, which is a big part of why our species expanded to all the continents and so on. But that basically means that we are post-scarcity now. And that's a huge thing to point out with this discussion overall, is we are having this discussion in the context of a post-scarcity planet where we have made the innovations where it is now possible to selectively have certain kinds of diets that wouldn't have existed before. We have global trade, so you can trade all kinds of food items from place to place that you couldn't in a hunter-gatherer society. You can have like huge fields of potatoes and all kinds of really nutrient-rich things that we can grow for ourselves. So we can now make assessments that you couldn't necessarily make if you were in an Alaskan fishing village 1,000 years ago. Like the assessments that they're making for their moral concern are different because their scarcity problem is very different from ours, which is we get food at a grocery store. I haven't really gone out hunting and gathering my food. Normally I go to the grocery store. It's a different world now.
Yeah. Also, most of human civilization grew in fertile parts, so in areas where you had abundance for food earlier than we had it in, let's say, Texas, for example, where it's harder to grow food. And as far as we know, the preference not to eat animals is as old as we know. Like as old as there is writing, there were people that decided against eating animals. So it's not necessarily a new concept. It's wider spread than it used to be, and it's more common knowledge to have this as a choice. But it's not something new per se.
Yeah, that kind of points to India as a random example of a country that had a different provision for a certain animal that it put higher in the like ethics category than other animals. Cows are sacred to some people in India, which means that there are many vegetarians in India who don't consume meat. They just have milk maybe, or they just selectively don't eat cows. Like that, you could say, is an ethical consideration that one particular culture has decided upon that isn't a global one. We have some that are mostly global, like you should not eat dogs. Like many people agree upon this, even if they're not a vegetarian or a vegan. They just see dogs as
dog festival people.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like the whole planet isn't even fully on the don't eat dogs front. But that is a different stance than people have for cows. Like, there are a lot of people who will eat cows but not dogs. So certain animals have certain provisions and ethical considerations that we don't give to all of them yet.
So, two things. India, great example, because I was referring to the Bhagavad Gita as one of our oldest pieces of writing that has people that do not eat meat in it. Cows, bad example, because the English brought cows to India, and basically they told the natives that the cows are sacred and they shouldn't eat them because they wanted the people to live off the cow milk and not just eat the cow they were providing. So
I did not know that.
yeah.
It says something about it in the Bhagavad Gita. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, if you type it in chat, we can look it up. That sounds interesting.
I have that book. I have it.
Oh.
That assumes I know how to write it.
That's the book that I told you. I was at a festival and I was sitting there and I was getting ready in the car. I think I was like smoking a bowl or something. Some random dude knocked on the door and said, "Hi, your name is Tricia. These books are for you." And I was like, "What?" And it was 3 just spiritual books, and it was very random. And then he disappeared in the distance, and I swear it was like a fucking alien. So, and I haven't read them, but I tried to, and it was really difficult for me to read. And I remember being like, "I'll try this at some point," but they've been sitting there for a while. But yeah, I have it.
Huh. It's originally in Sanskrit.
I think that's why it was so hard for me to read.
It's a Hindu scripture. Huh. Cool. I hadn't heard of this.
You could read it to me, baby.
Thank you, Fuzzy Cord.
Yeah, Fuzzy Cord typed it out. Thank you. A viewer named Liver King says, "Look at all these subprimals. Liver is king." What does this subprimal mean? Do you just eat livers
Some people
only?
want to be a sub.
Yeah, it's valid. I feel like eating livers only is just going to have so many issues, but best of luck. We're going through the questions here. We've hit the first 4. Are human rights a natural or a social construct? My initial reaction is the pursuit of human rights in terms of empathy and wanting to care for others. I think that's a universal quality that people have in different amounts. It's like part of your demeanor. How much do you care what other people feel? But the concept of writing them down and making them into laws that are enforced, that is a social construct. We've decided upon those after talking about them and basically perpetrating evil for a certain amount of time where you agree, okay, this is evil, okay, this is now illegal. That's when it becomes a social construct. Whenever you see someone crying and you want to go take care of them and see if they're okay, that's a natural animal empathy response, which other animals possess as well. Maybe some of you have seen your cat or your dog, whenever you're really upset, go over to try and reassure you. That's because they notice that you're not okay and they're trying to help you. So that, I think, is a natural construct in a sense. But yeah, that we codify things and write them into laws is definitely social.
So a lot of our responses to bad things happening seem very natural, and our dislike for cruelty, for example, our willingness to help people, all of it seems natural. But then when it comes to formulating law out of it, as you said, it's definitely a social construct, and it's very difficult, as you can see when we look at the Human Rights Declaration, on how to formulate this in order to make it so other countries would agree upon, other people would agree upon. To codify something in a quote-unquote universal way is super difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes to codify laws for animals, it becomes a whole other beast, because it's not that an animal could agree or disagree with the moral groundwork we set out with any kind of rules. we have to assume that we're doing the right thing.
Makes sense. Chad has a question. You're curious at what point I would be okay with eating/farming animals for food. I mentioned earlier my previous headcanon. If that were a reality, would I still be okay with eating meat from a moral standpoint? Well, you can say they're different shades of good and bad. Like, you get more light side points and more dark side points depending on what you do. So there are more ethical farms and there are less ethical farms. I'm dating TriciaxPain, and we're madly in love with each other. And for me to be dedicated to not eating animal products is such a massive plus. If you think about just like kissability factor of if someone ate something that's repulsive to another person and then you go for a smooch, it's not going to work. So being someone who is supporting my partner and supporting her cause is a huge point of value, to the point where for me that's not something that I'm really thinking about experimenting or exploring. But
just so everyone knows, I did not force him to do it, and I always tell him how I feel bad and I feel like he's missing out on things and I feel guilty. So I just want everyone to know.
Yeah, I definitely took it more in the terms of I get to prove my dedication and my devotion for you by
Which is very sweet.
performing a feat of not eating certain stuff. Which is not quite as hard as a lot of people make it out to be. But it does take some steps.
You ate really healthy beforehand, though. I was very lucky to meet someone like you, because you just took out, like, chicken from your slow cooker, and that was, like, one of your main things you were eating all the time.
Yeah.
And you're doing almond milk, so it's like, or oat milk, so it's like, it's pretty easy for you. And you're not a foodie either. And I cook, so you're just like, sure, I'll eat that. I just hand you food, plates of food all the time, so I feel like you're not missing out on too much.
Yeah, the main stuff that I would say that I have missed would be, yeah, the social freedom was nice just because I was like a eat everything kind of person. So you do have to be more selective, and you do have to say stuff at restaurants where they won't know what you're talking about. So I actually went to one restaurant in Dakota and I ordered the ramen with shrimp, and I said, can I get that with no shrimp, please? And I actually got it with extra shrimp because she thought I was asking for more shrimp. So, or they were trolling me, I'm not sure. But it
Probably
does.
trolling you. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It does take some steps. You can look at different animal relationships. Like, one of the examples is keeping chickens to lay eggs. You are exploiting the animal to get eggs, but relatively speaking, that's one of the less mean trades to give a farm animal. You're not killing the chicken, though many male chickens will die in the process because of how chicken social structure works. Just a quick aside on this because it's interesting, and they're dinosaurs. They're like lions, where the most dominant male gets pretty much all the females. Sometimes it'll be shared by two, but usually it's just one, and they will fight each other to the death or physically wound each other a lot. So it's a very aggressive species in terms of how the group interacts with itself. Once you get to the point of having mostly hens and maybe a rooster, it's mostly peaceful, where it's just about trying to protect them and that kind of a thing. But then you've got the assessments of how much range do these animals need, what kind of food do they want, are they living a good life, because they
Also
don't have
being
language.
bred.
Yeah, being bred for a certain type of egg and so on.
And then the ones that they don't like go bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's one of the points that vegetarians will have eggs, milk, products that are of the animal but don't require the killing of the animal, whereas vegan is going beyond that and saying anything that involves the harm of an animal or the potential like inconvenience or torture of the animal in the case of like milk production. I've been vegetarian/vegan for about 2 years. Have I noticed any muscle gain/loss? I've experienced muscle gain, but I've also been working out harder, so it's not the best direct comparison. I was doing burpees, I think, before I started going vegan. So I was pretty lean and stuff. My arms and my legs are bigger now because we have weights here. But it's not that complicated. There's vegan protein powder, so you can still get your protein about the same. And then just mixing in more hearty stuff like chickpeas, black beans, potatoes. I eat a lot of heavy stuff, like stuff that Tricia would consider to be very comfort food and very calorie dense. I just slam all of that because plant products have less calories than animal products in terms of density. So you eat more food eating vegan than you would non-vegan, which is interesting.
Yeah, I've been vegan for 12 years, and I was vegetarian for 1.5 years before that. I never wanted to eat any animal products. I never even tried seafood before. My parents forced me to eat, dinner. They were like, eat this, and I never ate the seafood. So whenever my parents had seafood or beef, because I didn't like the way the beef really looked, they would make me chicken. And when I first discovered, because we used to order Chinese food, and I used to get spare ribs with my mom, I remember eating them with her. And my mom, she was very much like whenever we would go out to eat, she would say she wanted it mooing if she got a steak. So I, as a kid, was like, oh, I want it the same way as her. And then one day I was like eating the ribs, and I looked at her, and they were like, yeah, spare ribs. It's ribs or, whatever the fuck. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a rib of an animal. And then that made the connection there. I think seafood was easy because you could see the full animal there. But, like, the beef part was always gross because it was bloody. And then, like, I made the connection with the beef and the ribs, and I was like, oh, gross. And then, like, my family would kind of fuck with me. Like, every time I would eat meat, it'd be like, moo or something. I dated a guy when I was like in like middle school. He would moo at me and something if I ate meat or something. And I was just like, I don't want to eat this. My family's forcing me to do it. And it really sucked. But it was just normal. They weren't like forcing me. It was just normal family pressure of like, this is your dinner, eat it.
Yeah.
So as soon as I could be on my own, and as soon as I met a vegan, I was like, cool, done. Vegetarian was pretty easy because I was living on my own. But as soon as I met a vegan, I came out to California. I was like, oh, that's a thing you can do. I don't have to do that. You can do almond milk. Okay, awesome, easy, done.
I used to make fun of vegans.
I know.
Yep.
It's very cute. I've seen the videos.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you ended up with me.
It's okay. I admitted with a friend who went vegan, Jack Attack actually, when we lived at a team house together, we were sitting in the back of a truck going out for boba with other StarCraft guys. And we were talking just about how he ethically has the high ground. And I conceded that. It's like, by you not sullying your hands with the like evil doings of the animal like food industry, that has your hands cleaner. I respect that. That's cool. It wasn't a decision that I was ready to make at the time, but I respected it. And that kind of caught him off guard because most people try to justify it in a sense of, oh, no, it's not bad, or make fun of them for, oh, you're too much of a softie or whatever, because this is kind of...
soft and fair.
Yeah, it's kind of connected to macho cred as well for a lot of men, where eating meat is manly. And every man to pass is basically kind of subconsciously pursuing a certain amount of macho cred if you want to be cool and pass as a man. EcceFatum gets a free win because he's super tall, so he doesn't have to do anything. But for a lot of people, they feel like they need to show off to be macho and to be manly. And eating meat and eating gross stuff and all kinds of stuff like that definitely falls into that category of getting some macho cred.
Well, do you want to tell them the story about what you told me today?
The snake?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I have killed an animal before in a context where we're at a villa in Tuscany, and it's like a nice house kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They've got like big wine fields and grassy fields and so on, and we're renting this house for about a week and a half, and we're touring some of the countryside. And there's a big-ass snake that's like crawling on the side of the house, like directly on the window, and it crawled like right in front of my mom as she's like trying to cook dinner or whatever, and she was like, wow, like screaming and freaking out and everything. And I was like, I'll save you. Got a knife, went outside, killed it. And that was something that gave me a lot of macho cred. I got to protect my family, and I felt good about the experience. Like, I protected them from something that was scaring them. Statistically speaking, based on the kind of snake that it probably wasn't a physical threat to us. It was more of a mental threat of making my mom and the family feel uncomfortable. So that was a step that I took, just a very direct way of like closing that plot line of them worried about a snake. The most ethically upright thing to do would be to probably get some nice gloves so you're not going to be hurt, and then grab the snake and yeet it into the field or something. So it can continue to exist. It's away from you. You defend your family, but that requires a couple extra steps and a little bit more personal risk to
But you
yourself.
still get the same amount of macho cred. But the only thing
yes.
is the fact that then the snake still exists. So I understood why you'd want to protect and like completely annihilate the issue for your mom, and I understand that to an extent. So it's like, and especially if you're in like a scenario or something. So it's like, it's very interesting because I used to kill bugs. That's my thing. I used to fucking kill bugs. I'm I'm freaked out by bugs. I would like to live in peace with bugs, but yeah. So sorry, continue your story.
Oh, no, that was basically the end of it. I thought of myself as a badass and a protector, but in the context of like being the most righteous protector you can, it would have been more light side, more good, if I grabbed the snake and yeet the snake instead of chopping the snake. And that's a decision that we can all make, in how you basically decide your ethical navigation of the world, which creatures you harm and how much, because the world is dangerous. There are situations where you might need to defend yourself, either against another human or against an animal of some kind. So you do have to have that set of priorities of who are you going to protect. Like Tricia was talking about this earlier. If there was something that was going to threaten her cat, she's obviously going to protect her cat because he means the world to her. So that level of priority is going to be higher for whatever we consider to be more valuable. So one of the big things that I would challenge people to consider more is consider more of how different creatures are valuable. What are they good at? I've found it to be really rewarding and fun to like go to the sanctuary with Tricia and meet different kinds of creatures that you wouldn't normally meet. Like I met an emu, and it was just kind of walking around with its bad self, basically like a ostrich kind of looking thing. Llamas, pretty cool, pretty interesting. Pigs, hecking massive, the ones that we saw. Sheep, there's this sheep that was bleeding, like it was yelling and dying at the same time, but it was just trying to baa, I guess. It was like, ah!
Oh, it wasn't bleeding, it was yelling.
It was yelling.
Yeah. It was yelling like it was bleeding.
Yeah, animals are cool. We had a Neuro chop emote. Can we get a Neuro yeet emote? Yeet is a good expression. I'm glad it was invented. There are some Zoomerisms that are not the best, like Riz. Riz, just if I can communicate to the Zoomers, you should call it Cha. It's been called Cha since like the 60s. Charisma. Abbreviated CHA in Dungeons and Dragons. It's Cha.
So, as we were talking about dietary restrictions or what types of food we do or do not eat, I eat everything. Well, most things. I do eat all the things I like, which does include animal products and meat. And things here in Switzerland are quite a bit different in terms of farming regulations, in terms of what type of life an animal gets to live before they are slaughtered, which for me, not to justify the practice of farming animals per se, but it makes more of a difference than just not like caring for an animal and then eventually eating it is more different to me than just farming them in huge stocks for the production value. So I think it's possible to have a animal live a quote-unquote good life from our point of view and then eat it afterwards. Then again, I do like to avoid the question because once I get to think a bit deeper about it, it is questionable to do so.
Well, because it feels more like you're like taking advantage of them, or like I wouldn't like. I think about would I be able to do that, like raise an animal and be like, okay, buddy, like on your 15th birthday, I'm gonna slit your throat, like, but I'm gonna give you a good life until then. Like to me, I understand where it's like once you start thinking about it, it's like fuck, you know, because I don't know what the rules are for how long they actually do let them live. Because I mean, here it's like a eighth of their life, I think. It's like 6 months for certain animals, and like I could get the numbers out, but I understand what you mean.
It's less than I expected whenever we watched the documentary and stuff. I think I mentally, just in my head canon of the happy cows on the happy farm, I would assume that they live 5 to 8 years. That was kind of what I wanted to believe without researching anything. But I think it's like, it depends on the kind of meat that you're harvesting, but it's between 6 months and 2 years usually. But like 2 years is a pretty long amount of time. Yeah, it's very interesting thinking about the personality and how the more you think about it, the less it feels good to eat it.
Well, how about the whole milk thing? We all thought that cows just produce milk all the time too. Like, I just didn't think about the fact that they're pregnant. Like me, it's like, oh, like the babies get taken away so we can have their milk. That kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always sad. But I didn't know any of this shit. You know, there's so many other fucking weird things that go on in the animal industry that I'm like, I don't talk about it too much because I don't want to be like totally scarring people's brains, but also I don't really want to be arguing with people sometimes. But sometimes, what the fuck are some of the practices? Like, how do we still think that some of these things are okay? I'm like, and I feel bad for all the workers. Personally, I feel bad for all the people that have to work for them. I'm not angry or anything like that. A lot of them have to have those jobs, so I completely understand. I wish that I can open up, you know, a nice sanctuary, hire all the people who are slaughtering animals and be like, okay, now you guys are going to just take care of animals and make sure they're happy and hug them all the time to make sure that they live out the rest of their lives happy because we rescued them from these other shitty places. That'd be great. Let's give them those jobs instead of fucking making them go slaughter things and be in blood all the time and then go home to families and fucking, I'm good.
Getting to retire to a sanctuary would be nice.
That'd be nice.
We have a question from chat. Go ahead.
I want to point out one thing which I do see as problematic here. Not to say that this would be a good idea to rescue all the animals, but to hack them, it's hard to get consent from the animals. And it's kind of like, it's one of those things where we're over humanizing animals and be like, they would like to get a hack from their former oppressors. I'm sure I will feel that way as an animal.
Valid.
Very true. But what if your oppressors are sitting there cleaning your shit and, you know, feeding you nice food and stuff? I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying it's like a lot of the animals that do exist only exist because we bred them.
We bred them.
For better or worse. Yeah. So getting rid of all of them would also be problematic in a different sense. But it's, for me, the important thing is we should give animals for the time they're on or they're with us, they should live a worthy life. Like the same as we would want for any other human, which we failed to provide. The same we would want for our pets. It's like we should be more respectful in the treatment, more so than worrying about whether it's the practice itself of killing them and eating them is the main problem. That's my point of view. And also going kind of into that is a lot of the comfy Swiss food kind of relies on bacon being in there. And it'd be hard to go without that.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Baking.
Bacon.
Oh, bacon. Gotcha. Yeah, bacon was never a huge hit for me, so I didn't really miss that one. But I know, like, there's a fellow streamer, Pig. He loves bacon. That's like one of his main things. For me, it was always sushi was the special kind of animal thing that I thought was good. Yeah, bacon never quite as much so. There was a question from chat. Question in regards to the ethical implications of creating monoculture, say for almond milk. It's not an animal, but it seems like perhaps not as good for the environment. For example, having to water the trees year round. I was just
gonna say, it's always the fucking water in the almonds fucking argument.
Yeah, well, you can think about, like I said, with the expanding sphere of moral concern, you have other animals that's part of that expanding sphere that we're now asking these questions of which animals should we give rights to. And then you also have the environmental factor, which how are we using our water? That's another good assessment. I would rate the use of more water to have almonds as being more ethically sound than farming animals and killing them for meat, just if I'm like ordering things on a list, because one involves pain toward other creatures and one of them is just resource use. We have tons of water on the planet, so it shouldn't be a problem, but water scarcity is a problem because we dirty our water. So I feel like that's a valid consideration of what are the most...
And what dirties our water? A lot of the farms and factory farms are fucking up our water. Okay.
We're being pretty sloppy stewards of the planet, I think, is a big picture assessment. So for us to take some accountability of how can we be better stewards of the planet, and how people can approach different angles for it as well. Like, we're not here telling that everyone after this talk, you need to be an animal rights activist now and make sure you go out to all your protests. Like, it's not about that. It's like, you're going to try to change the world in some ways, and there are many ways that we're fucking up. So if you're making progress over here, say in like women's rights and resources, go live your best life. That's awesome. Do that. If you're wanting to support animals, go do that. If you're doing some other good to the world, great. Not everyone can be equally focused on every issue. So these considerations are valid. How can we steward our water better is something that I'm very passionate about, and I have been for a long time. We have a huge garbage patch in the ocean that we can definitely clean up. All we have to do is direct our enthusiasm toward these improvements. Currently, we have a lot of enthusiasms toward war, toward drama, toward conflict, and that kind of thing, which we can save a lot of that energy and just build some cool-ass ships that clean the motherfucking ocean. Because if the earth is cleaner, then our water is more usable and we can do more stuff and people are happier. But it is expensive to do that. We have to convince ourselves that it's a worthwhile investment to invest in ethical considerations like granting animals rights. That's going to cost us time and money to do so. Cleaning up the oceans, that's also going to cost us time and money to do so. So we're not saying that this is like an easy quick fix where we can just decide it overnight and make it so. We do have to convince other people that these are things worth caring about. And I feel like younger generations are more likely to look at the earth and say, yeah, we can do better. The older generations are more so like, you're making this up or you're being too dramatic about it. Which, when they grew up, the earth was not as dirty as it is now. So their perspective is skewed compared to ours.
Yeah, I think the main thing here is that we still have to weigh all other moral consideration against the main moral consideration of number go up. If number doesn't go up, everything else is kind of useless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important. And to be fair, it is important in some sense. Like, number going down would come with a lot of other bad implications, but we're tend to overvaluing the whole number go up thing.
Number go up versus alignment go up. I really like the Dungeons & Dragons concept of your alignment. Are you lawful or chaotic or neutral? And then are you good or evil or neutral? The earth as a whole could be more lawful. I feel like we could do with more laws that give us more structure for how to treat each other well and more abiding of respectful rules that we decide. And then also we could be more good in dealing less pain and damage to other creatures and other ecosystems. But that's going to require us to take a more careful approach to things. We have to be considerate. We have to be gentle with our environment and with other creatures. And it costs us resources to do so. So just by having this kind of conversation where you're assessing what's going on, by researching things, that's amazing and great. People need to do more of that. Just to check in, we've gone through about half the questions, and we're at about an hour and a half. Do we want to go through more of them, or wrap up relatively soon and have an episode 2 at some point? Just vibe check here.
I'm chilling.
You're chilling?
I'd be good with doing a second part because it's getting quite late already.
Okay. Well, this has been really fun.
Thank you for talking about this.
Yeah. I give you huge credit for having so many good questions for this. It's too many for us to handle in an hour and a half, but also chat has been weighing in and been super active. So thanks, chat, for taking part in this. EcceFatum is our regular guest for Philos'o'clock. We host these on Thursdays usually. It's been less frequent recently due to having a child. EcceFatum has been practicing fatherhood as a new skill. And we had the amazing and gorgeous TriciaxPain on for this special animal ethics episode.
Hi.
Any questions or thoughts you want to leave us with, EcceFatum and Tricia?
EcceFatum, you can go first.
Well, one question that will come up later, but it's kind of my point of view on why I'm not more invested in animal rights. And this is not for me to say that animal rights are not important, but for me, it's definitely not my fight.
Totally understand.
I feel like that we're struggling enough or too much on the human rights front in order to concern ourselves with animals just yet, which sounds way meaner than it is meant. I'm just saying, if we don't have the laws and regulations down for humans and can enforce them and live by them, we should be careful to try to make laws and regulations that govern animals.
That's why I think it's the opposite. I agree with you. I feel the opposite on that. I feel like my fight is definitely for the animals, because I feel like we're not going to give a fuck about humans if we don't care about the animals.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you're both correct in the sense that you should always strive from your passion.
Totally.
And what you're passionate about changing, and you can't focus on every issue at once. There are too many issues in the world for you to be an every issue person where someone...
Thank you for caring about the human rights stuff, because I'm not that good at that stuff, and I try my best to understand and be knowledgeable with all that shit too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, chat, for weighing in. And then if you're in the YouTube comments, welcome. Thank you for partaking in the conversation. If you have any comments...
Can I say my last thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, I do care about human rights, obviously. But I feel like I agree with you totally on what you said, and I really like that you said the fact that that's, like, not your fight. Because it's something that Austin's been trying to, like... Because I get really, really emotional in it, and it's so hard for me to, like, have conversations about it, but it is my fight. So to try to not be emotional in something you care about so much, and you don't want to be, like, an emotional wreck about something, it's so hard. So picking your fight is definitely, and putting your energy towards something that you really feel like that's your purpose. That's a good way for our society and for humans to raise the vibration of the planet and raise everything equally. Because if everyone was focused on the one thing, I mean, that would be great, but it's good for everyone to be having their thing. I do feel alone in my fight a lot of the times, which kind of is a lonely thing. So if there's any people that have any questions about, you know, animal rights stuff or vegan shit, message me. You're not alone. So that's kind of what I want to say.
Hell yeah. Thank you, Tricia, for coming on. This has been really awesome. She has a nice sleepy rump behind her.
I'm an emotional activist that loves the animals. And personally, I feel like I've gotten so much from my relationships with my animals growing up. They've emotionally supported me so much. So I feel for the animals a lot.
I'm going to put your stream on real quick so people can see you and Loki. Lord Rumpus.
Oh, look at his stretch. Perfect timing for a good little stretch.
He's sleepy. Yep, Loki is definitely a support animal for you. He's like a vibe king where he's just so chill that his energy being around, he's definitely a stabilizing force just by his existence. And he's very fuzzy.
And he found me.
Yeah. You found him on the streets of Hollywood, so...
Yep.
Yes.
He came up to me and was like, she looks like she'll give me snacks.
Lord Rumpus is one of his silly names.
Lord Rumpus.
I think I came up with that.
I think so.
Yeah.
You've given him a couple names. It's actually adorable how much you love him. It makes me very happy how much I see Neuro gives him love and kisses and stuff, and they have a good little bond. They're buddies.
He's a buddy.
He's a buddy.
Well, awesome. EcceFatum, you'll have to let us know when you're keen to do a part 2 of this. This has been great.
With the kid sleeping semi more regularly than he used to do, I think we can aim for 2 weeks from now, and then I'll let you know if something special comes up and we'll have to move it again.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in for another episode with Philos'o'clock with EcceFatum and TriciaxPain. We'll see you on the next one. Nice.